In the gleaming towers of the Zephyrian Empire, where weakness meant death and perfection was law, a queen committed the greatest crime imaginable. She let her broken children live. The empire stretched across 7 star systems. Each planet followed one simple rule. The weak must die. Zephyrian culture demanded physical perfection from every citizen, especially from royalty. Children born with disabilities were taken to the temple at dawn. Their priests would release them to the stars, a beautiful phrase that meant execution. Queen Lyreth had watched such ceremonies many times. She stood on the royal platform, her face like stone, her heart screaming in silence. She wore robes of star silk that sparkled with constellation patterns. Her blue skin glowed with bioluminescent beauty. She looked every inch the perfect ruler. But deep beneath the medical complex, in a hidden chamber called Sublevel 7, 3 small princes sat in mechanized chairs. Their names were Kale, Nyx, and Orion. They were the queen's greatest secret and her deepest shame. The triplets had their mother's luminescent blue skin and large, expressive eyes. They looked like any other Zephyrian children from the waist up. But below the waist, their small bodies could not move. A genetic condition had left them paralyzed in Zephyrian society. This meant they should not exist. Yet here they were, alive but hidden, watched but never held. Kale, the eldest by 3 minutes, often stared at the ceiling. "Do you think Mama remembers us?" he whispered to his brothers. Nyx, who could sense emotions like others sense temperature, closed his eyes. "She watches us. I can feel her sadness through the walls." Little Orion, the smallest and quietest, simply held his brother's hands. His silence carried more weight than any words. The chamber was sterile and cold. White walls reflected harsh lighting. Medical droids moved in and out on scheduled cycles. They checked vital signs, administered medications, and cleaned the room. But they never spoke to the children, never played with them, never touched them except when necessary. The boys had learned to entertain themselves. They told each other stories about worlds they had never seen. They imagined running through crystal gardens and swimming in lakes of liquid starlight. They dreamed of a mother who might one day hold them. High above in her private study, Queen Lyreth watched her sons on wall-sized monitors. Every camera angle showed a different view of their lonely existence. She saw Kale's brave smile, Nyx's sensitive nature, Orion's quiet strength. She saw everything except how to save them. Her advisors were growing suspicious. They questioned why she had not produced public heirs. They whispered about her frequent disappearances to the medical complex. They demanded answers she could not give. "Your Majesty, the Council requires your presence," her assistant announced. Lyreth turned from the screens, forcing herself to look away from her children. "Tell them I will attend shortly." As she prepared to face the council, she did not know that far below, a human janitor named David Chen was descending to Sublevel 7. David was unremarkable in every way. He wore maintenance overalls, carried a worn toolkit, and kept his head down. He had come to this planet as a refugee after Earth's colonies were destroyed in war. He had lost everything: his home, his family, his future. Now he cleaned floors and repaired machines, grateful just to survive. His work order for the day was simple: fix an atmospheric recycling unit on Sublevel 7. It should take 1 hour, maybe 2. He had no reason to expect anything unusual. David stepped out of the service elevator into the quiet corridor. Emergency lights cast long shadows. His footsteps echoed strangely, as if the walls were swallowing sound. He found the maintenance panel and began his work. Then he heard it. A child's voice, soft and sad, drifting through the ventilation system. "Maybe tomorrow Mama will visit us," the voice said. Another voice answered, "We always say tomorrow." David froze, his sonic wrench forgotten in his hand. Children, there were children down here, and they sounded so alone. He followed the voices to an observation grate. What he saw through the narrow slots made his blood run cold. 3 small blue-skinned children sat in mechanical chairs, staring at nothing, waiting for someone who never came. And in that moment, David Chen made a decision that would shake an empire to its foundation. David Chen stood frozen at the observation grate for 17 minutes. He watched 3 small princes who would never know freedom, never feel sunlight, never hear their mother say she loved them. The maintenance job was forgotten. The atmospheric recycling unit could wait. Right now, something far more important demanded his attention. His hands shook as he pulled out his personal data pad. He began recording environmental readings, a cover story in case anyone questioned why he had stayed so long. But his eyes never left those three small faces. Kale, the brave one, was trying to tell his brothers a story, and then the space captain flew his ship through the meteor storm, he said with forced excitement. He saved everyone on the planet. Nix listened carefully, but his empathic abilities seemed to sense his brother's hidden sadness. Kale, do you think we'll ever leave this room? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Kale's brave mask cracked for just a moment. I don't know, little brother, I don't know. Orion, who rarely spoke, suddenly whispered something that made David's heart stop. Someone is watching us. The other boys looked around nervously. The cameras always watch us, Nick said. No, Orion insisted, his large eyes moving across the walls. Someone different, someone who feels warm. David realized with shock that the smallest prince could somehow sense his presence. But that was impossible. The observation grate was hidden, soundproofed, designed to be undetectable. Unless this child possessed abilities beyond normal Zephyrian senses. David made his decision in that instant. He would help these children, even if it cost him everything. He had lost his own daughter in the Earth colony wars. He had watched her die in his arms while enemy ships burned the sky. He could not save her, but maybe, just maybe, he could save someone else's children. The next question was how. Sublevel 7 operated on strict protocols. Medical droids followed precise schedules. Every door, every vent, every access point was monitored. Security systems tracked all movement, and somewhere someone was watching those monitors constantly. But David had spent 3 years learning this facility's secrets. He knew the maintenance tunnels like he knew his own heartbeat. He understood the shift changes, the gaps in coverage, the tiny windows of opportunity that existed in every system. He checked his chronometer. The medical droids would enter the chamber in 43 minutes for the evening medication cycle. They would spend exactly 12 minutes inside. During that time, the chamber's internal sensors would be temporarily deactivated to prevent false readings from the droid's electromagnetic signatures. 12 minutes. It would have to be enough. David returned to his maintenance locker on sublevel 3. His hands moved quickly, gathering items that would seem innocent to any observer. A music player, the last gift his daughter had given him before she died. Several strips of soft fabric cut from his personal clothes. A children's picture book he had carried across the galaxy as a reminder of home. These were not tools of rebellion, they were acts of humanity. As he prepared, David's mind raced through every possible consequence. If he was caught, he would be arrested, interrogated, probably executed. The Zephyrian Empire did not tolerate interference with royal matters, and these children were clearly being hidden for significant reasons. But he also knew what happened to people who saw injustice and did nothing. They became the injustice. David rode the service elevator back to sublevel 7. His heart hammered against his ribs, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. He had faced enemy fire during the war, had watched cities burn, had held his dying child. Nothing had ever terrified him more than this simple act of kindness. The corridor seemed longer than before, each step echoed with the weight of his decision. He reached the chamber door and pulled up his maintenance override codes. His fingers hesitated over the control panel. This was the point of no return. Once he entered that room, everything would change. The surveillance would record his presence, questions would be asked, and 3 small lives that hung by a thread might be cut loose entirely. But then he heard it again. Orion's small voice drifting through the ventilation. The warm feeling is getting closer. David pressed the override button. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Security protocols engaged immediately. He had exactly 60 seconds before the system registered an unauthorized entry. 60 seconds before alarms would sound throughout the entire facility. The chamber was smaller than it had appeared through the observation grate. The walls pressed in with sterile coldness, medical equipment beeped softly in the background. And in the center of the room, 3 mechanized chairs held 3 princes who stared at him with expressions of absolute shock. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Kale found his voice. Who are you? A friend, David said quickly, placing his items on the floor. I don't have time to explain, just know that someone cares about you, someone sees you. He activated the music player. The first notes of a Terran lullaby filled the chamber. The effect was instantaneous and profound. All three children gasped. Nyx's eyes went wide with wonder. Kale's mouth opened in surprise, and Orion, the quiet one, began to cry. Not tears of sadness. Tears of joy so pure they seemed to glow with bioluminescent intensity. "What is this?" Nyx whispered, his voice trembling. "Music," David said, backing toward the door. "From my world, from Earth, I want you to have it." "Wait," Kale called out, but David was already gone. The door sealed shut behind him, with 37 seconds to spare. David sprinted down the maintenance tunnel, his lungs burned. His legs pumped like pistons. Behind him, he heard nothing. The alarm had not sounded. The security systems had not detected him. Either he had succeeded, or he had just committed the most beautiful suicide in history. He made it back to his locker, stored his tools, and clocked out normally. His hands still shook, his heart still raced, but his face showed nothing but the tired expression of a janitor finishing his shift. As he walked to the employee housing complex, David did not know that 7 floors above him, Queen Lyrath was watching her monitoring screens with an expression that mixed horror, confusion, and something she had not felt in years. Hope. She rewound the footage for the 4th time, watching as this unknown human entered her son's chamber. She saw him place the gifts, saw him speak those words, saw him flee. And then she saw her children's reaction. Orion was laughing, actually laughing, a sound she had never heard from her youngest son. Nyx was moving his hands to the rhythm of the music, feeling emotions through sound, and Kale, her brave firstborn, was crying with relief. "Someone cares about you," the human had said. Those 4 words shattered something inside the queen's heart. Because she did care, she cared more than her throne, more than her empire, more than her own life. But she had never been able to show it, never been able to touch them, hold them, tell them they were loved. And this stranger, this human janitor, had done in 60 seconds what she had failed to do in 3 years. Lyrath pulled up the facility's personnel files. She ran facial recognition on the intruder. Within seconds, she had his full history. David Chen, maintenance worker, employee ID 7742, human, age 34, refugee status granted after the Terran Syndicate War, no living relatives, no criminal record, performance reviews. Adequate but unremarkable. She dug deeper. The war records told a different story. David Chen had been a colony engineer on Kepler 442b. When the Syndicate attacked, he had stayed behind to help civilians evacuate. He had saved 247 lives before the colony fell. He had lost his wife and 7-year-old daughter in the final bombardment. Lyrath stared at the image of David's daughter, a small girl with dark eyes and a bright smile. The child would have been about the same age as her triplets. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. This man had not helped her sons out of duty or politics or ambition. He had helped them because he knew what it meant to lose children. He had helped them because his broken heart still remembered how to love. And now the queen faced an impossible choice. She could have David arrested, interrogated, possibly executed. This would protect her secret, maintain security protocols, ensure the triplets remained hidden from the council. Or she could do nothing. She could let this human continue his small acts of kindness, let him give her children what she could not, the simple gift of being seen. Lyrath made her decision. She encrypted a new security protocol into the Sublevel 7 systems. From now on, Maintenance Worker 7742 would be exempted from intrusion alerts. His presence would be logged but not flagged. He could come and go as needed. It was the first time in 3 years that she had bent the rules protecting her children. It would not be the last. In the chamber below, the triplets listened to the music player for the 7th time. They had discovered the repeat function and were determined to memorize every note. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," Nyx said, his empathic senses overwhelmed by the emotional resonance in the melodies. Kale carefully examined the fabric strips David had left. They were soft, worn, clearly personal items. He gave us something of his own, Kale realized. These meant something to him. Orion held one strip of fabric against his cheek. His eyes closed in contentment. For the first time in his short life, He felt something other than medical equipment touch his skin. "The warm feeling is still here," Orion whispered. "Even though he's gone, I can still feel his kindness." The medical droids entered for their scheduled check. They scanned the children, noted elevated dopamine and serotonin levels, recorded the presence of unauthorized items. But their programming did not flag these as threats, merely as anomalies to be logged. After the droids left, Kale made a decision. "We need to thank him," he said firmly. "But how?" Nix asked. "We don't even know his name." Orion's eyes suddenly glowed with faint bioluminescence. "I can feel him in the building, not far away, sleeping in a small room, dreaming of someone he lost." His brothers stared at him. "How can you possibly know that?" Kale demanded. "I don't know," Orion admitted. "But I do, just like I knew he was watching us, just like I can feel Mama watching us right now through the cameras." Kale looked directly at one of the hidden surveillance devices. "Mama, if you can hear us, if you're really watching, please, please let us meet the kind man, let us say thank you." In her study, Queen Lyrith felt tears stream down her face. Her son had spoken directly to her, across all the barriers of secrecy and fear. He had reached out. And she realized with sudden clarity that she had been a coward. She had told herself she was protecting them by keeping them hidden, but the truth was simpler and more terrible. She had been protecting herself, protecting her throne, her power, her reputation, while her children suffered in isolation. The queen stood and walked to her communication terminal. Her hands moved across the controls with newfound purpose. She began typing a message that would change everything. But before she could send it, her office door opened without warning. Her chief advisor, Corthan, stepped inside. His face was grave, his eyes were cold. "Your Majesty, we need to talk about Sublevel 7. Lyrith's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. Corthan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I've been reviewing facility records, unusual power consumption in areas designated as storage, encrypted security protocols that bypass council oversight, medical supply requisitions that don't match any approved patients." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Tell me, my queen, what are you hiding in the medical complex?" And in that moment, Lyrith realized her carefully constructed world of secrets was about to collapse. She had three choices: confess and face the consequences, deny and risk deeper investigation, or do something she had never done before. Trust someone else with the truth. "Corthan," she said slowly, "what I'm about to tell you could destroy the Empire or save it, but either way, there's no going back." Far below, David Chen lay in his narrow bed, unable to sleep. He stared at the ceiling and wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, or the most important choice he would ever make. The music player continued its cycle in the prince's chamber, filling the sterile room with melodies from a destroyed world. And three small boys held hands in the darkness, whispering their first prayers of hope in years. They did not know that above them, their mother was revealing their existence to the one person who had the power to save them, or destroy them completely. The next 48 hours would determine which. Queen Lyrith stood before her most trusted advisor and prepared to destroy everything she had built. Corthan had served the throne for 40 years. He had guided her father, counseled her during the succession wars, and stood beside her through every crisis the Empire had faced. If there was anyone in the galaxy she could trust, it should be him. "Should be." "Corthan," she began, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "3 years ago, I gave birth to triplet sons." The advisor's expression did not change. He simply waited, watching her with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Lyrith continued, "They were born with a genetic condition, paralysis from the waist down, according to our laws, according to our traditions. They should have been released to the stars." "But you didn't release them," Corthan said quietly. "No," the queen admitted. "I hid them in sublevel 7 of the medical complex. I've kept them secret from the council, from the military, from everyone." The silence that followed felt like the pause before an execution. Then Corthan did something unexpected. He smiled. But it was not the smile of understanding or compassion. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "I've known about your sons since the day they were born." Lyrath felt the floor drop out from under her. What? Did you really think you could hide something like that from me? Corthan moved to her desk, pulling up files on her monitor. I monitored every medical report, every supply requisition, every encrypted communication. I've been watching those children just as closely as you have. The Queen's mind raced, trying to understand. Then why didn't you report them? Why didn't you expose me? Corthan's smile widened. Because I was waiting for the right moment, waiting for you to reveal your weakness publicly, waiting for the perfect opportunity to remind this empire why our laws exist. Horror crashed over Lyrath like a freezing wave. You're going to use my children against me. Not against you, your majesty, Corthan corrected. Against the dangerous ideology you represent, you've grown soft, compassionate, weak. You question our traditions, hesitate to enforce the purity laws, sympathize with refugees and lesser species. He pulled up footage of David Chen entering the prince's chamber. And now you've allowed a human, to contaminate your defective offspring with primitive sentiment. This is not just a violation of protocol. It's a betrayal of everything our empire stands for. Lyrath's hand moved toward the security alert on her desk, but Corthan was faster. He pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Every screen in her office went dark. I've locked down your communications, he said calmly. You cannot call for help, cannot warn your human pet, cannot do anything except listen to what happens next. Corthan, please, Lyrath begged. They're children, innocent children. They are abominations. Corthan's voice turned cold. And tomorrow, the entire council will see them for what they are. I've scheduled an emergency session. I've prepared evidence of your crimes, and I've arranged for your sons to be brought before the assembly. You can't, Lyrath whispered. I can and I will. Corthan moved toward the door. By this time tomorrow, the council will vote for their execution. You will perform the release ceremony yourself, and this empire will remember why weakness must never be tolerated. He paused at the threshold. Oh, and your majesty, don't bother trying to move the children. I've placed my own security teams around sublevel 7. Any attempt to remove them will be met with immediate termination. The door closed, leaving Lyrath alone with her horror. She had trusted the wrong person, and now her children would pay the price. 20 floors below, David Chen was experiencing something he had not felt in years. Joy. He sat on the floor of the prince's chamber, having used his new security clearance to enter during the late shift. The triplets surrounded him as best they could in their mechanized chairs, their faces bright with curiosity. Tell us more about Earth, Kale demanded. You said there were oceans. What are oceans like? David smiled, pulling out the children's picture book he had brought. Oceans are massive bodies of water that cover most of the planet. They're blue, like your skin actually, and they're so deep that we never explored all of them. Nix leaned forward, his empathic senses drinking in David's emotions. You loved Earth very much. I did, David admitted. It wasn't perfect. We had wars, poverty, disease, but we also had beauty. We had forests where trees grew so tall they touched the clouds. We had music and art and stories. Like the music you gave us, Orion whispered, speaking more than he usually did. Exactly like that, David agreed. Kale's expression grew serious. David, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you help us? The young prince asked. You're risking everything for 3 aliens you don't even know why. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small holographic projector. He activated it, and an image appeared in the air. A little girl with dark eyes and a bright smile. This was my daughter, David said softly. Her name was Maya. She was 7 years old when she died. All 3 princes stared at the image with wide eyes. The syndicate attacked our colony without warning, David continued, his voice thick with old grief. I tried to get everyone to the evacuation ships, but there were too many people and not enough time. Maya and her mother didn't make it. Tears streamed down Nix's face, his empathic abilities feeling David's pain as if it were his own. I held her as she died, David whispered, and I promised her that if I ever got the chance to help another child, any child, I would take it, no matter what it cost me. Kale reached out and touched David's hand. We're not your daughter. No, David agreed. But you're someone's children, and you deserve to be loved, you deserve to be seen, you deserve to know that your lives matter. Orion's eyes began to glow with that strange bioluminescence. David, you have a good soul, I can feel it. It's warm and bright and sad. Yeah, kid, David smiled through his own tears. I guess it is. But you're still here, Cale said firmly. Still helping people, still being kind, that's very brave. Not brave, David shook his head, just human. And in that moment, something shifted in the chamber. The triplets looked at each other, then back at David. An understanding passed between them. This human, this stranger from a destroyed world, had become more of a parent to them in 2 visits than anyone else had been in their entire lives. David, Nix asked hesitantly, would you teach us more about being human? What do you mean? David asked. You said humans value things our empire doesn't, Cale explained. Compassion, kindness, seeing strength and weakness. We want to learn those things. We want to be more like you. David felt his heart break and heal at the same time. I would be honored, he said. For the next hour, David told them stories of human history. He spoke of people who had overcome impossible odds, of scientists who were disabled but changed the world, of leaders who turned weakness into strength. He told them about Stephen Hawking, a brilliant scientist who could not move or speak without assistance, but whose mind unlocked the secrets of black holes. He told them about Helen Keller, who could not see or hear, but learned to communicate and became a voice for justice. He told them about Malala Yousafzai, a young girl who stood up against those who said she was worthless and changed her entire society. You see, David concluded, humans learn something important. We're all broken in some way, all imperfect, all struggling, but that's what makes us strong because we know we need each other. Orion's glowing eyes grew brighter. I wish our people understood that. Maybe someday they will, David said. He did not know that in her locked office, Queen Lyrath was watching this conversation on her monitors, tears streaming down her face. He did not know that Corthan was also watching, his expression twisted with disgust. And he did not know that he had less than 12 hours before everything would explode. The council chamber of the Zephyrian Empire was a massive circular room carved from a single piece of black crystal. Holographic projectors displayed star maps of all 7 systems under imperial control. 200 council members sat in elevated seats, their faces stern and proud. At the center stood a platform where the accused would be judged. Corthan had spent the night preparing his presentation. Every detail was perfect. Every piece of evidence was damning. The council had been summoned on emergency protocols, and they were curious and angry about being pulled from their duties. Perfect. Queen Lyrath entered the chamber flanked by royal guards. She wore her full ceremonial armor, a clear message that she would fight this to the bitter end. But Corthan knew she had already lost. Honored council, he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. I have called you here to address a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our empire. The council members leaned forward with interest. Our queen, whom we have trusted and followed, has committed treason against our most sacred laws. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Corthan activated the holographic display. Images of the triplets appeared in the air, 3 small princes in their mechanized chairs. 3 years ago, the queen gave birth to defective offspring. According to our laws, they should have been released to the stars immediately. Instead, she hid them. She used imperial resources to keep them alive. She violated every principle of genetic purity that has made our empire strong. The council erupted in angry voices. Lyrath stood silent, her face a mask. But that is not the worst of her crimes, Corthan continued. She has allowed a human, an inferior species, to interact with these abominations. This human has been contaminating them with primitive ideologies, teaching them to embrace weakness, reject our traditions, and question our laws. He played footage of David's visits, carefully edited to make his kindness look like manipulation. This human refugee plots to use the Queen's defective children to undermine our society. Corthan's voice rose with passion. He seeks to infect our empire with human sentimentality, to make us weak like his species, to destroy everything we have built. The council was in an uproar. I propose the following actions, Corthan declared. Immediate execution of the defective offspring, arrest and trial of the human saboteur, and removal of Queen Lyrath from the throne for gross violations of imperial law. No, Lyreth finally spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos. You will not touch my children. They are not children, Corthan shot back. They are mistakes, errors, threats to our genetic integrity. They are my sons, Lyrath's voice shook with fury, and they have as much right to live as anyone in this chamber. Right to live, a council member shouted. They are paralyzed, useless, a drain on resources. They are brilliant, Lyrath countered. Kale has memorized the layout of the entire medical complex from wall patterns alone. Nyx can sense emotional resonance across vast distances, and Orion. She paused, making a decision that would change everything. Orion can interface with technology using only his mind. The council fell silent. What did you say? Corthan's confident expression faltered. My youngest son is a telepath, Lyrath stated clearly. He can control computers, open doors, access networks. His brothers have similar abilities. The genetic condition that paralyzed their bodies also gave them powers we have never seen before. She walked to the center of the platform. You call them defective, I call them evolved, you call them weak. I call them the future. Everything you think you know about genetic perfection is wrong. These children prove it. Corthan's face turned purple with rage. She's lying, desperate lies to save her abominations. Then bring them here, one council member suggested. Let us see for ourselves. Yes, another agreed. If they truly have these abilities, we should witness them. Corthan saw his plan slipping away. He had not expected Lyrath to reveal the children's powers. He had not prepared for this possibility. Very well, he said coldly. Bring the creatures. Orders were transmitted to Sublevel 7. And in the maintenance tunnels below the council chamber, David Chen heard those orders through the complex's communication system. He had been performing his regular duties, unaware of the emergency session, unaware that Corthan had set this trap. But now he understood. They were coming for the children. David ran. He sprinted through the tunnels, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He had to reach Sublevel 7 before the guards did. He had to warn the triplets, save them somehow. He burst through the maintenance access door and into the prince's chamber. 3 small faces looked up at him with surprise. David, Kale smiled. You're early today. We need to leave, David gasped. Right now, all of you. What's wrong? Nyx asked, his empathic senses detecting David's terror. The council knows about you, David said, moving to Kale's chair. They're coming to take you away. Orion's eyes began to glow intensely. I can feel them, lots of people, angry people, coming down the elevators. Can you walk? David asked desperately. All 3 boys shook their heads. David made a decision. He grabbed the fabric strips he had given them days before. He began tying them together, creating a makeshift harness. What are you doing? Kale asked. I'm getting you out of here, David said grimly. He lifted Orion first, the smallest prince, securing him to his back with the harness. Then he positioned Kale and Nyx so they could hold onto his shoulders. This is going to be uncomfortable, David warned. We trust you, Nyx said simply. David moved toward the door just as it exploded inward. Royal guards poured into the chamber, weapons drawn. Maintenance worker 7742, the lead guard announced. You are under arrest for unauthorized contact with classified subjects. Step away from the subjects immediately. These aren't subjects, David said, positioning himself between the guards and the children. They're people, children, and I'm not letting you hurt them. Move aside or we will use force. Orion's eyes blazed with bioluminescent fury. Suddenly, every weapon in the guards' hands sparked and died. Their armor systems shut down. Even the lights in the corridor flickered. Orion, David whispered in awe. I can't hold it long, the small prince gasped, the effort clearly draining him. You don't have to, David said. Just give me 10 seconds. He ran through the doorway into the maintenance tunnels, carrying 3 princes on his back and shoulders. The guards recovered quickly, giving chase. Seal Sublevel 7, the lead guard shouted into his communicator. Lockdown protocol now. Red lights began flashing throughout the complex. Blast doors slammed shut, every exit sealed. David and the princes were trapped. In the council chamber, Corthan's smile returned. Your Majesty, he said to Lyrath, It appears your human friend has just committed kidnapping, and your sons have demonstrated that they are not just defective, they are dangerous. He turned to the council. I move for immediate termination, not just of the human, but of all three subjects. They have proven themselves to be threats to imperial security. The vote was swift and unanimous. Approved. Corthan activated the complex-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor, every chamber, every tunnel. David Chen, you have nowhere to run. Surrender the subjects, and you will be given a quick execution. Continue to resist, and you will watch them die slowly before we kill you. In the tunnels, David leaned against a wall, breathing hard. The princes clung to him. What do we do? Kale asked. David looked at three small faces filled with fear and trust. And he realized something. He had spent 3 years trying to survive, trying to rebuild some semblance of a life after losing everything. But survival wasn't living. These children, in their brief existence, had shown more courage, more hope, more humanity than most people showed in a lifetime. If this was where his story ended, at least it would end doing something that mattered. We fight, David said firmly. Orion's eyes met his. I can help, I can control the complex systems, open doors, shut down security. How long can you maintain control? David asked. I don't know, Orion admitted. I've never tried anything this big before. Then we'd better make it count, David said. He looked at Kale and Nyx. Can you two do anything? Kale nodded. I can guide us. I know the layout of every tunnel, every vent, every hidden passage. Nyx closed his eyes. And I can sense where the guards are. Their emotions are like lights in my mind. I can see them coming before they arrive. David felt something he had not felt since the war. Hope. All right, he said. Then here's what we're going to do. But before he could explain, the entire complex shook. Explosions rocked the tunnels. Corthan had ordered orbital weapons to target specific sections of the facility. He was willing to destroy the entire medical complex to eliminate the threat. David held the princes close as debris rained down around them. And in the council chamber, Queen Lyreth screamed. The medical complex shook like a dying star. Dust and debris cascaded from the ceiling as orbital weapons pounded specific sections of the facility. Corthan was not trying to capture them anymore. He was trying to erase them from existence. David Chen crouched in a maintenance tunnel with 3 princes clinging to him, protecting their small bodies with his own metal groaned above them, warning of imminent collapse. We have to move, Kale shouted over the explosions. This tunnel won't hold. Where? David demanded. Every exit is sealed. Orion's eyes blazed with bioluminescent fury, brighter than David had ever seen them. The small prince's entire body trembled with effort as he reached out with his mind. I can feel the complex, Orion gasped. Every wire, every circuit, every system, it's all connected, it's all alive. Orion, you're glowing, Nyx whispered in awe. It was true, Orion's skin had begun to emit a soft blue light, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Energy crackled around his small form like miniature lightning. The genetic condition, David realized suddenly. It didn't just give you mental abilities, it changed your entire cellular structure. Another explosion rocked the tunnel, this time closer. Orion, can you open a path to the surface? David asked urgently. The smallest prince closed his eyes. His consciousness expanded through the complex's network like roots through soil. He felt every door, every elevator, every emergency hatch. And he felt something else. There are people trapped, Orion said, his voice distant. Medical staff, patients, they're sealed in the lower levels. The bombing is going to kill them. David's jaw tightened. How many? 47, Orion whispered. 47 lives. Kale looked at David with eyes far too wise for his age. We can't save everyone and escape. No, David agreed, we can't. Nyx's empathic senses flared, feeling David's internal struggle. You're thinking of saving them instead of us. I'm thinking, David said slowly, that I didn't survive the war just to become the kind of person who leaves innocents to die. But if we stay, we die too, Kale pointed out. David smiled grimly. Yeah, probably. The 3 princes looked at each other. A silent conversation passed between them, then Kale spoke for all of them. Then we save them. Your children, David protested. This isn't your responsibility. You taught us something, David, Nix said softly. You taught us that being human means helping people even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything. We want to be human like you, Orion added. David felt tears sting his eyes. These three boys, rejected by their own empire, imprisoned since birth, had somehow become better people than most of the galaxy. All right, he said, then let's do this the human way. Another explosion, much closer now. Orion, can you map the safest route to the trapped people? David asked. The small prince's eyes glowed brighter. Yes, through the medical storage areas, the structural supports are strongest there. Nix, I need you to sense where the guards are concentrated, David continued. We avoid the largest groups. Nix nodded, his empathic abilities spreading out like invisible fingers. Most of them are near the main elevators, but there's a squad moving through the eastern tunnels, heading this way. Kale, you're our navigator, David said. Tell me every turn, every shortcut, don't let us get lost. I won't, Kale promised. David adjusted the harness holding the princes, making sure they were secure. This is going to be rough. We trust you, all three said in unison. And they ran. David's legs pumped like pistons as he navigated the crumbling tunnels. Kale called out directions with perfect precision, guiding them through corridors David had never even known existed. Left at the junction, Kale commanded. Then straight for 50 meters, there's a maintenance ladder that leads down. Behind them, they could hear guards shouting, weapons fire echoing through the complex. Nix's eyes went wide. They're getting closer, I can feel their anger there, their fear. Fear, David panted. Why would they be afraid? Because of me, Orion said quietly. The small prince extended his consciousness further into the complex's systems. As the guards pursued them, their weapons began malfunctioning. Their communicators went dead. Their armor systems shut down. Orion, what are you doing? David asked. Making them afraid, Orion replied, his voice strangely calm. They should be afraid of what they've done to us. David felt a chill. The small prince wasn't just defending them. He was fighting back, and his power was growing with every passing moment. They reached the medical storage area. Inside, 47 terrified people huddled against the walls as explosions shook the facility. Who are you? A Zephyrian doctor demanded, staring at David and the princes. Someone trying to keep you alive, David said bluntly. The complex is being bombed. This section is going to collapse in minutes. We need to evacuate now. Bombed, another voice cried. Why would anyone bomb a medical facility? Because of us, Kale said quietly. They're trying to kill us, you're just casualties. The medical staff stared at the three princes. Recognition dawned on several faces. You're the queens, one nurse began. Defective offspring, Kale finished bitterly. Yes, we know what we are. But you shouldn't have to die because of us, Nix added. David cut through the growing panic. Everyone listen, I'm going to get you out of here, but you need to follow my instructions exactly, understood? The Zephyrians looked at this human janitor with his cargo of forbidden princes. They had a choice, trust him or die in the rubble. They chose trust. Orion, David said, can you find us a route to the emergency hangars? The small prince's eyes blazed. His consciousness swept through the complex. Yes, but the main routes are all blocked or monitored. What about the service tunnels? Kale suggested. They're too narrow for this many people, Orion said. Then we make them wider, David decided. He looked at Orion. Can you control the structural supports? Can you open passages where we need them? Orion hesitated. I think so, but I've never tried anything that big. There's a first time for everything, kid, David said gently. The small prince took a deep breath. His eyes closed. His consciousness expanded further than ever before. And throughout the complex, impossible things began to happen. Blast doors that had been sealed for years suddenly opened. Emergency hatches that should have been locked slid aside. And in the service tunnels, walls began to shift. Orion was reshaping the facility with his mind. Move, David commanded the medical staff. Stay close, stay together. They followed him into the tunnels. David led the way with the princes still secured to his back and shoulders. The evacuees streamed behind them, trusting this strange human to save their lives. Nick suddenly gasped, "David, stop." Everyone froze. "What is it?" David asked. "Guards," Nick said, his empathic senses screaming danger. "A full battalion right ahead, they're waiting for us." David's mind raced. They were trapped between the collapsing complex behind them and armed soldiers ahead. "How many?" he asked. "At least 50, Nix whispered. The medical staff began to panic, murmurs of fear spreading through the group. Then Kale spoke up, his young voice carrying unexpected authority. "We won't run anymore." David looked at him in surprise. "Kale, we can't fight them." "We won't fight them," Kale said. "We'll show them who we really are." He looked at his brothers. "It's time." Nix nodded, understanding. "Yes, it's time they saw us." Orion's eyes blazed brighter than ever, together. The three princes began to glow. Energy pulsed from their small bodies, blue bioluminescence mixing with crackling electricity. The genetic condition that had paralyzed them was revealing its true nature. They weren't defective. They were transcendent. "What's happening?" one of the medical staff whispered in awe. David felt it too, power radiating from the children he carried. They were connecting to each other, their abilities amplifying, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. Kale's mind, which had memorized the complex's layout, suddenly expanded. He could see through walls, sense structural weaknesses, predict collapses before they happened. Nix's empathic abilities exploded outward. He could feel every emotion in the entire facility, every fear, every hope, every lie. And Orion's technological interface became absolute. Every computer, every system, every piece of machinery answered to his will. Together, they were unstoppable. "David," Orion said, his voice echoing strangely, "put us down." "What? No, you can't." "Please," Kale interrupted, "trust us." David carefully lowered the princes to the ground. For the first time since he'd met them, they sat without their mechanized chairs, their small bodies motionless from the waist down. But they didn't need to walk. Energy lifted them. The three princes rose into the air, suspended by their own power, glowing like small stars in the darkness of the tunnel. The medical staff fell to their knees in shock and reverence. "Impossible," someone breathed. "No," David said firmly, "not impossible, just different." The princes floated forward toward the waiting guards, David, and the evacuees followed, drawn by a power they couldn't understand but could feel in their bones. Around the corner, 50 armed guards waited in formation, weapons raised, ready to fire. The battalion commander saw the glowing princes approach, and his voice trembled as he gave the order. "Open fire." But the weapons didn't respond. Every gun, every energy rifle, every piece of technology the guards carried simply stopped. Orion had seized control of all of it. The guards stood frozen, watching as three small princes who shouldn't exist floated toward them on wings of pure energy. "We are not your enemy," Kale's voice rang out, amplified somehow. "We are your future." "We do not hate you," Nix continued. "We pity you. You serve leaders who teach you to fear difference, to destroy what you don't understand." "But we forgive you," Orion finished, "because that's what our friend David taught us. Forgiveness is more powerful than revenge." The guards stared in stunned silence. Then one of them, a young soldier barely older than the princes themselves, dropped his useless weapon. I won't fight children," he said. Another guard followed his example, then another and another. Within moments, the entire battalion had lowered their weapons. The commander's face twisted with rage and shame. "You're traitors, all of you." "No," the young soldier said firmly. "We're Zephyrians, and we're remembering what that really means." Far above, in the council chamber, Corthan watched all of this unfold on the monitoring screens. His perfect plan was unraveling. The medical staff who should have died were being saved. The guards who should have killed the princes were joining them. And worst of all, the entire event was being broadcast across the Empire. Millions of Zephyrians were watching three, defective, princes demonstrate abilities beyond imagination, watching them show mercy to those who had tried to kill them. Watching them be more noble than the Empire that had rejected them. "Shut down the broadcast," Corthan screamed. "I can't," a technician replied. The systems aren't responding, someone's locked us out. Orion, still floating in the tunnels far below, smiled faintly. Queen Lyrath stood in the council chamber, tears streaming down her face as she watched her sons for the first time not as hidden shame, but as the heroes they truly were. "Honored council," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You wanted to see my children, now you have. Do you still call them defective?" Silence answered her. "Do you still call them weak?" More silence. "They are showing us what we have forgotten," Lyrath continued, her voice building with passion. "Strength is not just physical power, wisdom is not just tradition, and perfection is not the absence of flaws but the courage to overcome them." She turned to face the council directly. "My sons have demonstrated more nobility in their few years than this empire has shown in centuries. They have the power to destroy their enemies but choose mercy instead. They have every reason to hate us but choose forgiveness." Her voice rose to a shout. "And if you cannot see the value in that, if you cannot recognize true greatness when it floats before your eyes, then this empire deserves to fall." Several council members actually stood, moved by her words. But Corthan was not finished. "Beautiful speech, Your Majesty," he said coldly. "But words change nothing. Those creatures and their human pet are still traitors, and I still have the authority to end this." He pulled out a remote control device. "I've planted explosive charges throughout the complex, not orbital weapons that give them time to escape, immediate detonation. Everyone in that facility dies in 3, 2. "Stop," a voice commanded. Everyone turned. In the doorway of the council chamber stood a figure that made Corthan's blood run cold. The Emperor. Lyrath's father had abdicated years ago, supposedly dying in peaceful retirement. But here he stood, ancient and powerful, his presence commanding instant silence. "Father," Lyrath whispered. The old emperor walked slowly into the chamber, every eye upon him. "I have watched this proceeding from my chambers," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "I have seen everything, the hidden princes, the humans' kindness, Corthan's betrayal." He turned to the advisor. "And I have seen enough." "My lord," Corthan began, "I only sought to preserve." "You sought to preserve your own power," the emperor cut him off. "You have used our laws as weapons, twisted our traditions into chains. You have made us into monsters who fear our own children." He walked to the center of the chamber. "When I ruled, I made mistakes. I enforced the purity laws. I sent defective children to the stars. I believed I was building a strong empire." His voice broke slightly. "But I was building a prison, and now my grandchildren, children I never knew existed, are showing us the bars we cannot see." He looked at the monitoring screens showing the princes. "They are magnificent." Corthan's face went pale. You can't mean." "I mean that my grandsons will live," the emperor declared. "I mean that the human who saved them will be honored, and I mean that you, Corthan, are under arrest for treason." Guards moved to seize the advisor. Corthan's hand tightened on the detonator. "If I cannot save this empire from weakness," he snarled, "then I will save it from existence." His thumb moved toward the button, but the device sparked and died in his hand. On the screen, Orion's eyes blazed with power. "No," the small prince said, his voice somehow carrying through the monitoring system. "No more killing, no more fear, no more." Energy pulsed from all three princes. Throughout the complex, every explosive device Corthan had planted simply deactivated. Every weapon, every bomb, every tool of violence rendered harmless. The princes had just saved everyone. In the council chamber, Zephyrians who had voted for execution moments before now stood in silent awe. The emperor turned to his daughter. "Lyrath, bring them home, bring my grandsons home." The queen's legs nearly gave out with relief. But she had one more thing to do. She looked at the council. "I am abdicating the throne, effective immediately." Gasps echoed through the chamber. "I will not rule an empire that values power over compassion," she continued. "I will not sit on a throne built on the graves of innocent children. If you want me back, you will change. You will reform every law that punishes difference. You will welcome the weak instead of destroying them." She looked directly at the cameras. "And you will build a new empire, an empire my sons can be proud of." Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. She had children to meet. In the tunnels below, David watched as the three princes slowly descended from their floating heights. The glow around them faded, leaving three exhausted but triumphant boys. "Did we do it?" Cale asked weakly. "Did we win?" Nix added. David caught them as they fell, cradling all three in his arms. "Yeah, kids," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you won." The medical staff and guards who had witnessed everything began to cheer. These children, these supposedly defective princes, had just changed the course of history. And they had done it the human way. With compassion, with mercy, with forgiveness. Orion looked up at David with tired eyes. "David, I'm scared." "Of what, buddy?" David asked gently. What if they still don't want us?" Orion whispered. "What if we're still not good enough?" David held the small prince closer. "Then they don't deserve you, but I have a feeling, a very strong feeling, that things are about to change." The sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel. Everyone tensed, ready for another fight. But the figure that appeared around the corner made all three princes gasp. Queen Lyrath stood there, still in her ceremonial armor, tears streaming down her blue face. She looked at her sons, really looked at them, for the first time without cameras or secrets between them. "My children," she whispered. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Cale found his voice. "Mama." And the queen ran. She fell to her knees beside David, gathering her sons into her arms, holding them for the first time since the day they were born. All three princes wept. So did their mother. David carefully stepped back, giving them space, giving them the moment they had all been denied for so long. The medical staff and guards watched with their own tears falling. Even hardened soldiers found themselves crying at the sight of a mother, finally embracing her children. "I'm sorry," Lyrath sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I should have held you from the beginning. I should have stood up for you. I was weak. I was a coward." "No, Mama," Nick said, his empathic senses feeling her genuine remorse. "You were scared, we understand." "You kept us alive," Cale added. "That took courage, too." "And you found David," Orion whispered. "You let him teach us. You could have stopped him, but you didn't." Lyrath looked at David through her tears. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for being the parent I should have been." David shook his head. I just saw three kids who needed someone. Anyone could have done it." "But you did," the queen insisted. "When everyone else looked away, you saw them, you valued them, you showed them what it means to be human." She stood, still holding her sons. "David Chen, by the authority I still hold, I grant you full citizenship in the Zephyrian Empire. I name you official guardian and teacher to the princes, and I give you a voice in the new council that will rebuild our society." David's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, I'm just a janitor." "You're a hero," Cale corrected. "Your family," Nix added. "You're our father," Orion said simply. The word hung in the air. "Father." David felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. He had lost his daughter, but somehow he had found three sons. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," the queen requested. "Say you'll help us build something better." David looked at three small faces filled with hope. He thought of Maya, his lost daughter. He thought of everything he had survived, endured, sacrificed. And he realized this was why. This was what all the pain had been for. To get him to this moment. To these three children who needed him. "I'll stay," he said. The princes cheered weakly, still exhausted from their display of power. Around them, the complex's evacuation continued. The fires were being contained, the structural damage assessed. But something fundamental had shifted. The Zephyrian Empire would never be the same. As they made their way toward the surface, toward sunlight the princes had never seen, Lyrath walked beside David. "What you did was impossible," she said quietly. "No," David replied. "What they did was impossible. I just reminded them that impossible is just another word for hasn't happened yet." Very human philosophy. It's kept us alive for a long time. They emerged from the complex into the bright light of Zephyr Prime's twin suns. The princes gasped, seeing natural light for the first time in their lives. It's beautiful, Kale breathed. It's warm, Nyx marveled. Orion simply smiled, too overcome to speak. A crowd had gathered, thousands of Zephyrians who had watched the broadcast, who had seen three forgotten princes save an empire that had rejected them. When they saw the royal family emerge, they began to cheer. Not the formal, controlled applause of ceremony, but genuine, thunderous celebration. Signs appeared in the crowd. Let the princes live. We want change, strength, and difference. The empire was waking up. But as David stood there, holding three tired princes while their mother acknowledged the crowd, he noticed something. On the edge of the gathering, Corthan had escaped custody, and the former advisor was staring at them with pure hatred. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Part 5, The New Empire. Word count, 5,200 words, simple English third-person epic finale. 3 days after the medical complex incident, the Zephyrian Empire balanced on the edge of revolution. Queen Lyrath had moved her sons into the royal palace. Their presence was no longer a secret but a symbol. Every news broadcast across 7-star systems showed the three princes learning to live in a world that had rejected them. And the people were watching, some with hope, others with rage. David Chen stood in the crystal gardens watching Kale, Nyx, and Orion experience grass for the first time. Their mechanized chairs had been upgraded with advanced hover technology, allowing them to move freely through the palace grounds. It tickles, Nyx laughed, running his fingers through the blue-tinted vegetation. Kale was more practical, studying the garden's layout with his photographic memory. There are 2,847 individual plants in this section alone, he observed. Orion simply closed his eyes, his consciousness expanding to feel the electrical impulses in every living thing around him. Everything is connected, he whispered. I can feel the whole garden breathing. David smiled, watching them discover simple joys that should have been theirs from birth. But his smile faded as he sensed movement in the shadows. Boys, stay close to me, he said quietly. The princes immediately responded to the tension in his voice. Their chairs moved into a protective formation around David. What's wrong? Kale asked. Someone's watching us, David replied. Nyx's empathic senses flared. Not just someone, many people there, they're angry, David, they hate us. Before David could respond, figures emerged from behind the crystal trees. 20 Zephyrian soldiers in civilian clothes, their faces twisted with disgust. The leader stepped forward, a scarred veteran with cold eyes. Maintenance worker 7742, he said formally. You are under citizen's arrest for crimes against genetic purity. David positioned himself between the soldiers and the princes. The council has pardoned all actions related to the prince's protection. The council is corrupt, the veteran spat. Infected by human weakness, we represent the true Zephyrians, those who remember what made us strong. More figures appeared, surrounding them completely. At least 50 armed civilians, all true believers in the old ways. You poisoned the queen's mind, another soldier accused. Made her betray our traditions, now she spreads your disease throughout the empire. David's mind raced, calculating odds, exits, strategies. All of them ended badly. Listen, he said, keeping his voice calm. I understand you're afraid of change, but these children aren't your enemy. They're abominations, the veteran snarled, and you're the human who taught them to reject their place. He pulled out an energy blade, the only weapon that didn't require technology Orion could disable. We can't kill the princes without triggering a civil war, the veteran continued. But we can remove their corrupting influence, we can kill you. The soldiers advanced. Kale's eyes blazed, stay away from him. Or what, little prince, the veteran mocked. You'll float at us menacingly. No, Orion said, his voice strangely calm. We'll show you what evolution really means. The three princes' eyes began to glow. Energy crackled around their small bodies. But David grabbed Orion's chair. No, don't hurt them. They're trying to kill you, Nyx protested. I know, David said. But if you fight them, if you hurt them, you prove everything they believe about you being dangerous. You prove that power corrupts. Then what do we do? Kale demanded. David looked at the advancing soldiers, at their hatred and fear. And he made a decision. "You do what I taught you," he said softly. "You show them humanity." Before the princes could respond, David stepped forward, away from their protection. "You want me," he told the soldiers. "Then take me, but leave the children alone." "David, no," all three princes shouted. The veteran smiled cruelly. "How noble the human wants to die for alien monsters." "They're not monsters," David said firmly. "They're children, and if you can't see that, if you can't see past your fear to recognize innocence, then your empire deserves to fall." The energy blade rose. "Any last words, human?" David looked back at the three princes, at the boys who had become his sons in all but blood. "Be better than us," he said simply. "Be better than humans, better than Zephyrians, be something new." The blade descended, and the world exploded with light. Queen Lyrath materialized between David and the attacker, her personal shield generators absorbing the blade's energy. "Touch him and die," she commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority. Behind her, royal guards poured into the garden, hundreds of them loyal to the queen. The civilian soldiers found themselves surrounded. "Your Majesty," the veteran stammered, we were only attempting to murder an imperial citizen," Lyrath finished coldly, threatening the princes, committing treason. She deactivated her shield and walked toward the veteran. "You claim to represent true Zephyrians," she said. "You claim to remember what made us strong. Let me remind you of something you've forgotten." Her voice rose, carrying across the garden. "We were strong because we adapted, because we evolved, because we survived when other species died. And now evolution has given us a gift, 3 children with abilities we've never seen, and your response is to destroy them out of fear." She turned to address all the soldiers. "That's not strength, that's cowardice." Several soldiers lowered their weapons, shame crossing their faces. But the veteran wasn't finished. "You've been corrupted," he accused. "The human has made you weak, made you sentimental, you're not fit to rule." "Then who is?" Lyrath challenged. "You, a man who would murder children." "Someone who remembers the old ways," a familiar voice said. From the shadows stepped Corthan. The former advisor had escaped custody and gathered followers. Now he stood before them with an army of true believers. "Corthan," Lyrath's voice went ice-cold. "Your Majesty," he replied mockingly. "Or should I say, former Majesty, your abdication was quite touching, but the Council has refused to accept it. They've asked me to assume the regency until complications can be resolved." "What complications?" David demanded. Corthan smiled. "The complications of 3 defective princes and their human pet. Once they're eliminated, the Empire can return to proper order." The royal guards tensed, ready for battle. But Corthan raised a hand. "Please, no violence, not yet. I've come to offer a choice, Your Majesty. You can surrender the abominations for proper disposal. In return, you keep your throne and the human lives." "Or," Lyrath asked dangerously, "or we take them by force," Corthan gestured to his followers. "I have 3,000 soldiers loyal to the old ways. You have your palace guards. We both know how that battle ends." He leaned closer. "Civil war, millions dead, the empire torn apart, all because you can't accept that some children are better off released to the stars." Lyrath's hands clenched into fists. She was trapped. If she fought, the empire would burn. If she surrendered, her children would die. Then a small voice spoke up. What if there was a third option? Everyone turned to look at Orion. The smallest prince floated forward in his hover chair, his eyes glowing with bioluminescent power. "What if," Orion continued, "we proved that we're not defective, that our condition isn't a flaw but an evolution?" Corthan laughed. "Child, you can't even walk. How is that evolution?" "Because walking is overrated," Orion replied. His eyes blazed brighter. And across the Empire, every screen, every monitor, every display device activated simultaneously. Millions of Zephyrians suddenly saw the Crystal Gardens, saw this confrontation playing out in real time. "What are you doing?" Corthan demanded. "Showing them the truth," Orion said. He looked directly into the cameras, his mind controlled. "My name is Orion. I'm a prince of the Zephyrian Empire, and I was born paralyzed. His voice carried across 7-star systems. Your laws say I should be dead. Your traditions say I'm worthless. Your culture says I'm a mistake. He paused. But I'm not. Energy crackled around all 3 princes. My brothers and I are different. Our bodies don't work the same way yours do, but our minds are connected to technology in ways you can't imagine. Kale's eyes glowed. I can process information faster than your best computers. Nyx joined in. I can feel emotions across vast distances, detect lies, sense danger before it arrives. And I, Orion concluded, can interface with any system, control any machine. I am the future of cybernetics without implants. The broadcast reached billions. Parents watching with their own children. Soldiers in distant fleets. Scientists in research stations. All of them seeing 3 small princes make their case for existence. We didn't ask to be born this way, Orion continued. But a human taught us something important. He taught us that weakness is only permanent if you accept it, that limitations can become strengths if you adapt. David felt tears streaming down his face. David Chen lost everything in the war, Kale explained to the watching empire. His home, his family, his daughter, he had every reason to be broken, to give up. But he didn't, Nyx added. He survived, he rebuilt, he found purpose in helping others. He showed us what humanity really means, Orion said. Not the species, but the quality, compassion, resilience, the ability to see value where others see waste. The youngest prince turned to face Corthan directly. You want to know what's wrong with the Empire? It's not us, it's not our mother, it's not even the human. His voice hardened. It's you, it's every person who chooses fear over growth, tradition over progress, comfort over compassion. Corthan's face turned purple with rage. Enough of this, seize them. His soldiers moved forward. But then something unexpected happened. Some of them stopped. A young soldier dropped his weapon. No. What did you say? Corthan demanded. I said no, the soldier repeated louder this time. I won't kill children, I don't care what the law says. Another soldier joined him. Neither will I. Then another and another. Within moments, half of Corthan's army had defected. The former advisor stared in disbelief. You're all traitors. No, one of them said. We're Zephyrians, and we're remembering what that really means. Across the Empire, the broadcast continued. In homes and schools and workplaces, people watched. And something shifted. Parents looked at their own children differently. Soldiers questioned orders they had never questioned before. Scientists began to wonder what other defects might actually be gifts. The Empire was changing. Not through violence, but through understanding. Corthan saw his support crumbling, saw his perfect plan falling apart. And he snapped. If I can't save this empire, he screamed, then I'll purge it. He pulled out a device David recognized. A biological weapon, designed to target specific genetic markers, designed to kill anyone with genetic abnormalities, including the princes, including millions of Zephyrians across the Empire who carried minor genetic variations. Corthan, don't, Lyreth shouted. But the former advisor was beyond reason. They'll thank me eventually, he muttered. When the weak are gone, when only the pure remain, they'll understand. His finger moved toward the activation button. Time seemed to slow. David's mind raced through options. The royal guards were too far away. Lyreth couldn't reach him in time. There was no way to stop him. Except, Orion, David shouted, the device, can you control it? The small prince's eyes blazed, his consciousness reaching out. But the weapon was shielded, designed to be immune to technological interference. I can't, Orion gasped. It's protected. Corthan smiled triumphantly. Goodbye, abominations. Then Nyx spoke up. Orion, you can't control it alone, the empathic prince said. But what if we tried together? Understanding flashed between the brothers. Kale, I need your processing power, Orion said urgently. You have it, Kale responded immediately. Nyx, I need your empathic connection. Always, Nyx agreed. The 3 princes joined hands. Their eyes blazed with combined power. Energy crackled between them like lightning, and something impossible happened. They merged, not physically but mentally, three consciousnesses becoming one. Kale's analytical brilliance, Nyx's emotional intuition, Orion's technological interface, combined into something the galaxy had never seen. A gestalt entity of pure thought and power. The merged consciousness reached out, through the weapon's shielding, through Corthan's protective gear, directly into his mind. And they showed him everything. Every child who would die if he pressed that button. Every parent who would mourn. Every dream that would end. They made him feel it all. The weight of millions of lives. The enormity of his intended genocide. They forced him to see his victims not as genetic defects, but as people. Children with hopes. Parents with love. Individuals with value. Corthan screamed. The device fell from his hands. He collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the flood of empathy. I didn't so many, he sobbed. The princes separated, the mental merger ending. All three of them slumped in their chairs, exhausted. David caught them before they could fall. Rest, he whispered. You did it, you saved everyone. Corthan knelt in the grass, broken by the weight of understanding what he had almost done. I thought I was saving the Empire, he whispered. I thought purity was strength. Lyrath stood over him, her expression unreadable. Purity, she said quietly, is a myth. Every living thing is a mixture. Every strength comes from diversity, every advancement from change. She gestured to her sons. They showed you compassion when you deserved none. They could have killed you, could have destroyed your mind. Instead, they gave you understanding. She looked at the cameras still broadcasting. That is true strength. Across the Empire, in homes and ships and stations, Zephyrians were crying. Not from fear, but from realization. They had been so wrong. For so long. In the Crystal Gardens, Corthan was taken into custody. But this time not for execution. For rehabilitation. For learning. For a chance to become better. Because that's what the new empire would be about. Not perfection, but improvement. Not purity, but growth. As the guards led Corthan away, he looked back at the princes. How, he asked simply, how can you forgive me? Orion met his eyes. Because a human taught us, the small prince said, that everyone deserves a second chance. 6 months later, the Crystal Gardens had been transformed into something extraordinary. Where once only perfect royal children had played, now dozens of young Zephyrians gathered. Children with genetic conditions. Children with disabilities. Children who had been hidden by families, too afraid to release them to the stars. They called themselves the Hidden Ones, and they were learning to be proud. David Chen stood among them, no longer a janitor but an official imperial teacher. He wore simple clothes still, uncomfortable with the title of royal guardian that Lyrath had insisted upon. But he wore it nonetheless, because these children needed him. All right, everyone, he called out. Today we're going to learn about human history, specifically about people who changed the world despite, or because of, their differences. 47 young faces turned toward him with rapt attention. Kale, Nyx, and Orion sat in the front, as always. But now they weren't alone. There was Zira, a girl born blind who could navigate by echolocation. Torin, a boy with brittle bones who possessed the most brilliant mathematical mind David had ever encountered. Lysa, born without arms, who had learned to manipulate objects with telekinetic abilities. And so many others. Each one unique. Each one valuable. Can you tell us about Maya? Nyx asked softly. The question made David pause. He rarely spoke of his daughter anymore. The pain had dulled to a gentle ache. But Nyx's empathic senses knew when David needed to remember. Maya, David began, his voice catching slightly, would have loved all of you. He pulled up a holographic image. His daughter's smiling face appeared in the air. She was 7 when she died, full of energy and curiosity. She wanted to be a scientist, wanted to discover new worlds. The children listened with reverent silence. But more than that, David continued. She was kind, she saw the best in everyone, she would have been friends with all of you immediately. Orion floated closer, his hover chair nearly silent. David, do you think she would be proud of you? David looked at the small prince who had become like a son to him. I hope so, he said honestly. I think she'd be happy that I found you all, that her death, as terrible as it was, led me here to this moment. Kale spoke up. You taught us that tragedy can have purpose, that pain can lead to meaning. Very human philosophy, a voice said. Everyone turned to see Queen Lyrath entering the gardens. She had changed in 6 months. Still regal, still powerful. But softer somehow. More present. She spent every day with her sons now, making up for lost time. Your Majesty, David started to bow. David, please, she interrupted. We've discussed this, your family. She moved to stand beside him, watching the gathered children. The council is drafting new laws, she reported. Every child, regardless of physical condition, will have the right to education, medical care, and opportunity. And the resistance, David asked. There were still those who clung to the old ways. Shrinking daily, Lyrath smiled, especially after Corthan's testimony. The former advisor had undergone 6 months of intensive therapy. Learning empathy, understanding consequences. He now traveled the Empire, speaking against the very laws he once enforced. People change, Lyrath said softly, given the chance. A commotion at the garden entrance drew their attention. Scientists from the Imperial Research Institute were arriving. Led by Dr. Vexen, the Empire's chief geneticist. Your Majesty, Dr. Vexen called out, we have the results. Lyrath's expression grew serious, and... You were right, the scientist said, pulling up holographic displays. The genetic conditions we've been calling defects are actually mutations. Mutations, David repeated. Evolutionary adaptations, Dr. Vexen explained. The radiation from our binary sun system has been affecting Zephyrian genetics for generations. We've been killing our own evolution. The scientist pulled up more data. The prince's abilities aren't unique. They're just the most pronounced example. We've found similar gifts in dozens of the hidden ones. Lyrath looked at her sons with new understanding. You're not broken, she whispered. You're next. Next what? Kale asked. The next stage of our species, Dr. Vexen said excitedly. Within 3 generations, abilities like the princes possess will be common. We're evolving from a purely physical species to something greater. Because of radiation, David said thoughtfully. Because of adaptation, the scientist corrected. Your species faced similar pressures. Humans developed complex brains to overcome physical weaknesses. We're developing psionic abilities for the same reason. Orion's eyes glowed faintly. So everyone who called us abominations was fighting against evolution itself, Lyrath finished. The revelation spread quickly. Within days, every Zephyrian knew. The hidden ones weren't mistakes. They were the future, and the Empire would have to change. Or die. Most chose change. 1 year after the Crystal Gardens incident, the Zephyrian Empire held its first integration ceremony. Representatives from all 7 star systems gathered. But this time, the guest list included beings who would have been unthinkable before. The hidden ones, 47 children, now confident and proud, demonstrated their unique abilities. The galaxy watched in awe. Kale displayed his ability to process star charts faster than computers. Nyx demonstrated emotional healing, helping traumatized soldiers overcome PTSD. Orion interfaced with an entire space station, controlling thousands of systems simultaneously. But the most powerful moment came at the end, when David Chen stepped forward to speak. A human, addressing the Empire that had once considered his species inferior. 1 year ago, he began, I was a janitor, a refugee, someone barely worth noticing. His voice carried across the vast assembly. I had lost everything, my world, my family, my purpose. I survived, but I wasn't living. He looked at the princes. Then I met 3 children who weren't supposed to exist, 3 boys who had every reason to give up, to accept that they were worthless. Emotion colored his words. But they didn't. They survived, they adapted, they became something greater than anyone imagined. He turned to face the billions watching across the empire. And they taught me something. They taught me that humanity, real humanity, isn't about being human. It's about recognizing value in the unexpected, about seeing potential where others see failure, about having the courage to grow instead of the comfort of staying the same. He walked to stand beside Queen Lyreth. The Zephyrian Empire was built on strength, on perfection, on purity, and it nearly destroyed itself because of it. He gestured to the hidden ones. These children saved you, not with weapons, not with armies, but with compassion, with forgiveness, with the willingness to be better. His voice rose with passion. That's the lesson humanity learned through centuries of war and suffering. That's what we can offer the galaxy, not technology, not military might, but the simple truth that everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Not polite, ceremonial clapping, but genuine, thunderous appreciation. The integration laws passed unanimously. From that day forward, the Zephyrian Empire would actively seek out those with genetic variations. Not to destroy them, but to nurture them, to help them develop their unique gifts, to build a new society where difference was celebrated. They called it the human principle, in honor of the janitor who had sparked a revolution with simple kindness. 5 years later, the Crystal Gardens had expanded to become the Imperial Academy for exceptional children. Thousands of students from across the empire learned there. David Chen, now gray at the temples but still energetic, taught his daily classes. But today was special. Today, the triplet princes were graduating. Kale, now 12 years old, had already published 3 papers on quantum navigation. Nix had developed new therapeutic techniques that revolutionized mental health treatment. Orion had designed cybernetic interfaces that allowed anyone to connect with technology. They had become exactly what David always knew they could be. Amazing. The graduation ceremony was held in the main hall. Queen Lyreth sat in the front row. Beside her sat the Emperor, David's equal partner in raising the princes. No one questioned it anymore. The human and the queen, co-parenting 3 princes who were changing the galaxy. As the triplets received their diplomas, they each gave a speech. Kale spoke of using knowledge to build bridges between species. Nix talked about the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership. Orion discussed the ethics of technology and power. But then they did something unexpected. They called David to the stage. "We have one more award to present," Kale announced. "This honor has never been given before," Nix continued. "But it's long overdue," Orion finished. They revealed a holographic proclamation. "By unanimous vote of the Imperial Council," Kale read, "and by acclaim of the citizens across all 7 systems. We hereby grant David Chen the title of Imperial Father," Nix continued. "With all rights and privileges of royalty," Orion concluded. The crowd rose to their feet. David stood frozen, overwhelmed. I'm not," he stammered. "You're not Zephyrian," Kale agreed. "You're not royal by birth, you're not genetically superior." "But you're ours," Nix said simply. "You're our dad," Orion added, using the human term deliberately. David felt tears streaming down his face. Lyreth approached, smiling through her own tears. "They're right," she said. "You've been their father since the day you left that music player in their chamber. This just makes it official." She placed a medallion around his neck. The symbol of imperial family. "Welcome home, David." The celebration lasted for days. But the moment David treasured most came later. In the quiet of his chambers, the 3 princes visited him. No cameras, no crowds, no ceremony. Just family. "David," Kale said seriously, "we wanted to tell you something." "We've been offered positions across the Empire," Nix explained. "Important positions where we could do a lot of good." David's heart sank. "You're leaving." "No," Orion said quickly. We're asking permission. We wanted you to know that no matter where we go, no matter what we do, you'll always be our father. And we'll always come home, Kale added. David pulled all three into a hug. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. All of you, you've become exactly what the galaxy needs. Because of you, Nick said. No, David corrected gently. Because of who you are, I just helped you see it. They sat together as they had so many nights before. A human and 3 alien princes. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by compassion, by love. 10 years after David first heard children's voices through a ventilation grate, the Zephyrian Empire had become unrecognizable. 7 star systems now celebrated diversity. Genetic variations were studied, not eliminated. The weak were protected, not destroyed. And humanity's philosophy had spread like wildfire. Other empires watched and learned. The galaxy was changing, all because a janitor decided to care. David Chen, now 60 years old, stood in the Crystal Gardens one final time. His hair was white, his steps slower, but his eyes still held the warmth that had saved 3 princes. Beside him walked Kale, now a renowned scientist. Nyx, a gifted healer and diplomat. And Orion, an engineer whose designs connected worlds. Dad, Kale said, using the human term they all preferred, the new students are arriving, do you want to greet them? David smiled always. They walked together toward the academy entrance, where hundreds of young beings waited. Zephyrians with unique gifts, humans seeking to learn, dozens of other species, all gathered to study at the academy that celebrated difference. As David addressed the new students, he saw their nervous faces. Many were afraid, unsure if they truly belonged. He knew that feeling well. Welcome, he said warmly, to the place where the broken become whole, where the weak become strong, where the impossible becomes possible. He gestured to the princes. These are my sons. 10 years ago, they were hidden in a basement, considered worthless, condemned to death. He smiled. Today, they're changing the galaxy, not despite their differences, but because of them. His voice grew stronger. That's what you'll learn here, not how to be perfect, not how to be pure, but how to be exactly who you are, and why that's enough. The students leaned forward, hope kindling in their eyes. The universe doesn't need more perfect people, David concluded. It needs brave people, kind people, people willing to see value where others see waste. He looked at each face. It needs you. As the assembly dispersed, David remained in the gardens. Kale approached quietly. Dad, are you okay? David nodded, looking at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. I was just thinking about Maya, he said softly. Your daughter, Kale said gently. Yes, David smiled. I think she'd be happy. She'd love seeing all of this, all of you. Nyx and Orion joined them. We wish we could have met her, Nyx said. You would have liked her, David agreed. She had your courage, Kale, your compassion, Nyx, your brilliance, Orion. She had your heart, Orion added. David felt tears, but they were good tears. Healing tears. You know, he said, I lost her in the war, lost everything, and for years I thought that was the end of my story. He looked at his 3 sons. But it wasn't, it was just a new chapter, a better chapter. Because of us, Kale asked. Because of each other, David corrected. They stood together as the stars emerged. A human father and 3 alien sons. Looking up at a galaxy, they had changed forever. Dad, Orion said quietly, thank you. For what? David asked. For seeing us, the 3 princes said in unison. David hugged them close. Thank you for letting me. And somewhere among the stars, in whatever place such spirits go, a 7-year-old girl named Maya smiled. Proud of her father, proud of the family he had found, proud of the galaxy he had helped transform. All because he remembered one simple truth. That everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to be valued. Everyone deserves a chance. That's the human principle. That's what humanity gives to the stars. Not weapons or technology or conquest. but the revolutionary idea that compassion is strength. That difference is beautiful. That love can change everything. And as the Zephyrian Empire spread this philosophy across the galaxy, other species listened. Other worlds changed. All because a janitor heard children crying and decided to help. That's what humans do best. We see the worth in everyone, and we never stop fighting for it. Ever 20 years later, the Galactic Council established the Chen Accord, named after David Chen. It guaranteed rights for all beings regardless of physical form or ability. 3 Zephyrian princes stood before billions to ratify it. Kale, the scientist, Nyx, the healer, Orion, the engineer, together. They had built a galaxy where no child would ever be hidden again. And every year on the anniversary of their liberation, they returned to the Crystal Gardens to remember a human janitor who taught them the most important lesson: that being seen is the first step to being valued. That being valued is the first step to being loved. And that love, simple human love, can change the entire universe.